So in this video, let's talk about the rules for subtracting fractions, decimals, and integers. Now, the examples I'm going to do are all going to be integers, but you can apply the same principles to fractions and decimals when you're trying to do that. The point here is, what do you do about subtractions? Subtracting is the same thing as adding the opposite. So in other words, you are going to change the operation from subtraction to adding, but also change the sign of the number that comes after that. Never change the sign of the leading number, the one before the subtraction sign, only the one that comes after. After you do that, follow normal adding rules and you're done. And I'm going to talk about why that makes sense too. Let's look at this first example, but before doing so, remember, when you are doing this, do not confuse this with the rules of multiplying or dividing. And division and multiplication, there's something that happens that causes signs to cancel when you have multiplying and dividing. But that does not happen in subtraction. So there are different rules for different situations. Try not to confuse them when you're trying to do problems, okay? Now, the first one here is 5 minus 3. How can I understand what that means? It's like I had $5 and then I took away a debt of $3. But if you take away a debt, that's like getting money. So overall, you ended up with $8. That kind of makes sense because I'm subtracting a debt. Or if you think about it in terms of good guy, bad guy example, I have 5 good guys and then I took away 3 bad guys. It's like they became good guys, right? So it's like adding the opposite. I walked 5 to the right and then I did the opposite of walking to the left. That is literally how you have to think of subtraction, doing the opposite of what comes next, right? And so with that in mind, it makes sense to add, instead of subtracting, the opposite number of -3, which is +3. Opposite just means a number with a same number with a different sign, right? Equal distance from 0 in a number line. So the way I like to think about this is the double slash rule. You slash the subtraction sign to change the operation to actual addition, and then you change the sign of the following number to the opposite sign. In this case, the negative becomes positive, and now you follow normal addition rules. 5 plus 3, same sign, put it together, 8. Let's look at another example. -3.2, -3. So again, remember, do not mess with the leading number. You just change the sign of the operation and the sign of the number next to it. So it becomes adding instead, and instead of 3, -3. And it looks like you're putting 2 negatives together, and that means becoming even more negative, right? So you put the numbers together because the signs are the same, normal rules of addition, and you get 6.2. And keep the sign of the biggest, which is obviously negative because they're both negative. So your answer is -6.2. Let's think about why that makes sense. If I have a debt of $3.2 and then I take away another $3, of course I'm going to be even more debt at the end. If I'm already 3 feet down and I dig another 3 feet, obviously I'm going to go even deeper down, right? If I have a bunch of bad guys and I take away some good guys, of course I'm going to be even more in trouble. So all of these ways of thinking about what the subtraction is trying to say essentially mean that you're doing the opposite. So with the double slash rule, the way this would look like is that you would slash here, not the first negative, the subtraction sign, and then also change the sign of the number that comes after to negative, and then operate like we talked about. Let's do a couple more examples here to make sure this is actually really clear. So let's see, we do -3 minus 5. I'm also going to do -3 minus 5. I'm also going to do 3 plus, oops, not plus, we don't want plus. It's all subtraction. 3 minus 5. And finally, I'm going to do 3 minus 5. And I don't like to write 2 negative signs next to each other. It confuses me. So I put a parentheses whenever that happens to separate the negative signs. You don't need to do that, but It's very useful for math that comes later on. All right, let's practice each one of those. If I already started with a debt of 3, but then I take away a debt of 5, that's actually going to help out, right? So it makes sense that when we slash the sign of the subtraction, don't mess with the first one, and change the sign of the number that comes after, you end up with -3 plus 5, since, now laws of adding, since the numbers are different signs, you're going to find a difference, which should be 2, and keep the sign of the biggest number. The biggest magnitude here is 5. The number is positive, so your answer is going to be 2. Made sense. I had some debt, but I then canceled even more debt, and so ended up in the green. Not about the next one. If I had debt and added more debt, of course I'm going to end up with even more debt. So let's see if this makes sense when we slash. Change the sign of the operation. Don't mess with the leading sign, only the subtraction sign, and then change the sign of the number that comes after. Always 2 changes. -3 and -5 are the same sign. So you put the numbers together by the laws of adding. So you get -8, keep the sign, and that's it. What about 3 minus 5? Well, it looks like I have $3, and then I'm going to lose 5. So of course I'm going to end up in the negatives over here. It's going to be a bad situation. Change the sign of the negative to subtraction, and then change the sign of the number that comes after. If you do that, you get 3 plus -5. They have different signs, so I find a difference, which is once again 2. But this time it's going to be negative because the 5 is a bigger magnitude number, and you keep the sign of the biggest. And so -2 is your answer. It made sense. If I started with $3 and lost a debt of 5, I actually made even more money because I canceled a debt. So if I slash the first one here and I change the sign of the number that comes afterwards, it looks like you have to do 3 plus 5. That's kind of like the first example we did. And you get +8. So with different kinds of combinations, we made +8, -8, 2, and -2, right? And so it's all different depending on the situation, but it's always the same is change the sign of the operation, slash. Change the sign of the number, either from negative to positive, from positive from after. But always the number after the subtraction sign, never the leading number, following added rules, and then you're done. We'll do more practice on this on the last workshop video, but I hope that you find that helpful. This is how you do subtraction.